Hi, I want to start out by saying that I have a lot to say, and I wrote it down to try to keep it all straight in my head. So I don't know if I'm gonna end up editing this in any way, shape, or form. I may just post it raw. Um, but I'm looking down here a lot. It's because I want to keep everything straight because I want to make sure that I cover a lot of things. That are very unpleasant but necessary to talk about. To begin with, I know that if you follow me, I have not been exactly incredibly vocal about everything that is happening with the Black Lives Matter movement and the protests that are happening around the country and around the world. Last weekend or 2 weeks ago, I had a death in my family and had to travel home for that during a pandemic. And at the time, I didn't have the bandwidth emotionally to handle that, and also try to be a good ally and handle this. So I hope that there's no fault there. But I'm here now, and I have lots to say. I want to start out to people of color and to Black people who I know, who I consider friends and family, and to every Black person in this country that has been victimized by this unjust system that we are now seeing. I see you, I hear you. I will never understand what you have been going through for centuries in this country, but I stand with you, and I will stand with you until my last breath, until you are awarded the human rights and dignities and respect that you are deserved, because you are all human beings. And I believe that all human beings, regardless of their size, their gender, their sex, their color of their skin, their religious beliefs, who they love, I believe that being born a human being warrants you a certain level of acceptance and love and respect and kindness. And that is something that people of color have not been awarded in this country for too long. To all of my white friends who are allies, who have spoken out, who have signed petitions, who have shared videos, who have shared posts, who have donated, all of those things, I am so incredibly inspired by all of you. I am so incredibly proud to consider some of you very good friends, very close friends of mine, some of you even family. And I just hope that this momentum continues, and I hope that we can continue to amplify Black voices, and hopefully this is the last time that we will have to do this, that we will be called upon to be allies in this way. I've been trying to take time to process how I'm feeling and what my thoughts are on everything. And it's been difficult, and it changes hour by hour and day by day. I am hurt and confused, but also I've lived in a time of social media where this is not the first time that this has happened. This is not the first time that an unarmed Black person has been unjustly treated, and that it has been caught on video and circulated throughout the internet, unfortunately. And it's very hard for me to not be desensitized to it. And sometimes I think that I still am, because sometimes I still see the video of George Floyd with a grown man kneeling on his neck, which is now being called modern day lynching, and I agree with that qualifier. It is hard for me to watch that, and sometimes to feel anything, not because I support what happened, or because I can't sympathize or empathize, but because it's just, I feel like the world has always been, there's always been negativity in the world, but the world has never been as hyper-connected as it is today, where something like that can happen, and in 10 minutes after a post on social media, the entire world can know about it. And it's hard to see things like that constantly happening around the world and just be just so overwhelmed and inundated with those images. And now with images of protests, of peaceful protesters being attacked by militarized police for no reason, for exercising their constitutional right to assembly and protest and to free speech, to have their voices heard in this country. And somehow that's now a crime. And so I'm still trying to process that and deal with that on a day-to-day basis, which is part of the reason why I have been very in the background on social media, not sharing a lot, because all of this happened after 3 months of incredibly negative media coverage and social media content about the coronavirus. And that was already taking a toll on me. And then a death in the family. And then this happens, and it's been hard. And I understand that this is not, I'm not trying to complain. I would never ever complain about being a white man in this country. I fully recognize how privileged I am because of that. And I fully recognize that I have the privilege of being able to step away from social media and not deal with this on a day-to-day basis, while there are Black people in this country who wake up every day afraid that it might be their last because of a traffic stop, or who knows. And it's been a lot. I want to address some things that I've been hearing. A lot of misinformation being, not misinformation, a lot of, I guess we'll say, defenses for the current system as it is. I've heard a lot of people calling these peaceful protesters and everyone talking about the Black Lives Matter movement radical. To that, I want to say, radical, the word radical is, in context, means that you are going against the grain, that you are doing something that is not the norm. So how can you claim that this country is not racist, but then call people who are protesting and calling for a newly anti-racist system radicals? You're only contradicting yourself, and you're proving our point. By saying that we are radical for wanting an anti-racist system, you are admitting that the current system, the norm, as I said, is racist. So you're making our point for us. So there's that. Number two, I've seen a lot of people, white people, talking about how there are more instances of police violence against white people, statistically. Statistics can be manipulated for any use. It is not the most foolproof science. The United States is 60% Caucasian and only 12% Black. So, if we're looking at those numbers, yes, it makes sense, and there is a correlation between police violence against white and Black Americans because there are just a vastly larger number of white people in the country. However, that 12% of Black Americans are 26% of all police violence incidents, including murder. So, by that count, Black people are more than twice as likely to deal with instances of police violence than white people. That is what all these protests are about. It is about protesting a police system that has been unnecessarily militarized for no reason. I see all these videos of, these SWAT police officers rolling up in armored trucks. This isn't a war zone. This is the United States. Why are they going to war against unarmed protesters who are protesting for a more fair and just society? That doesn't make any sense to me. Another instance that I saw yesterday, actually, on Twitter, has nothing to do with police violence. It does have something to do with a racist justice system. Racist justice system. 3 men, 1 white, 1 Asian, 1 black, all arrested and charged for breaking curfew. I don't know where the city was, but they were all arrested and charged for breaking curfew. The white man was fined $100. The Asian man was fined $300, and the black man was fined $500. None of them they all had the same or similar criminal backgrounds, same exact charge. Why was the black man charged 5 times as much as the white man and almost twice as much as the Asian man? And similarly, why was the Asian man charged 3 times as much as the white man for the same crime? We're not doing this because we're bored inside. There is systemic injustice happening in this country, and we're tired of it. We are just absolutely fed up with the images of needless blood spilt on our shores and in our cities for no reason, because a cop decided to make a judgment call about a black man or woman or child. I've also seen a lot of Christians who have either remained silent or who are making the call that all lives matter. To that I say you're also contradicting yourself, because I know it's been going around, but I believe it's like Luke 15, chapter 1, 15, whatever it is. I'm not the best Catholic, sorry. Jesus left the 99 to go and help the 1. That's what we're all trying to do. We're not saying that all lives don't matter. If you listen to what I said at the beginning, I do believe that all lives matter. However, when black lives are twice as more likely to be killed from police violence, when black lives are still making less money than white lives for the same work, when black lives are still being racially discriminated against in housing and in all of these things, even though there are laws in place to prevent that, but those laws have not worked, and there is evidence to prove that. All lives don't matter because they're not being treated the same. And to all of those Christians who have remained silent or who have said all lives matter or who remain actively complicit, I just say shame on you. The God that I was raised to believe in is a God of love and acceptance of all people. It does not matter the color of their skin. It does not matter if they're not even Christian. It does not matter if they're not even part of your church or part of your community. He doesn't care. God does not care about that. I believe that God created everything, and I know I don't talk about religion a lot, but if you're using religion as a weapon, I'm going to use it in defense of something that I believe in. Joey! I've also seen a lot of Christians and Christian organizations agreeing and denouncing the police brutality, but then in the same breath turning around and saying that we all must unite and pray for peace. You still didn't say Black Lives Matter, so you're still erasing the problem. You're still erasing the plight of millions of Americans. And that is unfair, and that is an incredibly privileged position for you to have. Imagine how quickly things would turn around if you used your privilege to help. If you used your privilege and donated to Black Lives Matter, donated to bail funds, signed petitions. Everyone is so concerned and is just wondering when this is all going to end. It's all going to end when things get better. It's all going to end when our demands are met. When we defund police, at least demilitarize them, when laws are passed to make sure that this doesn't happen again, and that if it does happen again, those perpetrators are brought to justice to the fullest extent of the law, and not because the video got out on social media and because people from around the world had to email police departments and district attorneys calling for the arrest and charging of murderers. That should just happen. It shouldn't have to be a teenager still in high school worrying about this, but it is. To those who are also trying to deflect and change the subject by talking about black on black violence, well, let's look at the history of that. If we go back to the 1950s, we can talk about something called white flight, which is basically white people who had the money left urban centers to live out in the suburbs in incredibly homogenous neighborhoods because people of color could not afford to leave those cheaper rents in urban centers. Because of that, funding and infrastructure investments bottomed out, and the people who were left behind had to learn how to survive. And the way for them to survive was the easiest way for many of them was to turn to a life of crime. We can talk about the war on drugs and the crack cocaine epidemic in Black communities. These are not conspiracy theories. This is history. And there's evidence to support all of these claims, not something that you just made up or something that Donald Trump is spewing out of his brain, out of his mouth. Because of that, and because of white flight, it basically formed it basically created a legal form of segregation, where all of a sudden white people were in the suburbs and people of color were stuck in urban centers that were horribly underfunded. And violence, in most cases, is a case of proximity. So, of course, black on black crime is going to happen because Black people are still incredibly centralized in these lower income areas. And that is not to say that all white people live in affluent suburban neighborhoods and that all people of color live in poor urban neighborhoods. That's not true. However, that generalization can be seen and that correlation can be seen as well. To members of the LGBTQIA plus community, this is an incredible moment to remember our history, to remember the trailblazers who started the gay rights, or I guess who reignited the gay rights movement with the Stonewall riots. Marsha P. Johnson set off that spark to get us to where we are today, to get us where we are 50 years later. And it's important to remember that. It's important to remember that even if you are a white gay man like myself, you owe it to a black trans woman who performed as a drag queen at the Stonewall Inn, who threw the first brick at the Stonewall riots. If you are still on the side of all lives matter as a queer person, that is the biggest contradiction that I have ever heard. Because if you live in this country, you are a victim of the idea that all lives don't matter. I live in Tennessee. Tennessee, in the middle of a pandemic, just passed a law that says that I can be denied the chance to adopt a child because I am gay. For no other reason. No other reason. I could be making $10 million a year. I could have a 6-bedroom house. I could have the best piece of property. I could have the best school districts. I could have the best family background. I could have no criminal record. I could be the best possible candidate for adoption in the state of Tennessee. And if an adoption agent found out that I was gay, they could just say no. They could just say no. And if you are a white gay man who is not using your privilege to talk about Black Lives Matter, to not bring up that fact, shame on you. Shame on you, because you are taking for granted the work of thousands of queer people that have come before you, thousands of queer people of color that have come before you and before me and before the current generation of queer people who have made it so that we live in a society that is so much more accepting and so much more loving. And there are still leaps and bounds to go before we reach full equality. But if you are a gay white man like me, chances are that you are a white man. And speaking from my experience, I come across as straight in many social situations. And that is a privilege that I have. I have the privilege of presenting as the norm in this country. But I actually care about people, and I will forever use my privilege to amplify voices who are not being heard, because I care more about leaving a legacy of justice and equality than my beach pictures and my abs. To the government, this is a product of lost faith. This is a product of a country that is absolutely exhausted at being stepped on, where the common person is just stepped on by a classist system that only sees us as dollar signs for the elite, for the people who are in power and for the people who are in charge that own the corporations that run the government. To the police who are attacking peaceful protesters, who are committing war crimes, who are stealing resources from people that need them, I would like to think that at some point when you decided to become a police officer, you believed in the idea of law and order. And I would hope that you would remember that, because it's going to send such a powerful statement if you lay down your weapons and fight with us. And this would go much quicker. And the images of you firing tear gas at children and at teenagers and at peaceful protesters who only want to see a positive change in this world and in this country will forever be ingrained in my memory and will forever be ingrained in the memory of history. The government and the people in power cannot whitewash this. They cannot sugarcoat this history that is happening right now. It is on the internet. It is on social media. Every time that I hear a name and a badge number of a police officer that has been identified to be attacking peaceful protesters, your name will remain forever on the internet and in history for exactly what you did. It will not be sugarcoated. It will not be whitewashed. It will not be forgotten. Because the internet does not forget. And I think that you are forgetting that. And that is just something that I hope you keep in mind and take to heart. To the military that is being unjustly and unconstitutionally mobilized to help quell these riots that are caused by, in some instances, by rogue, I won't even call them protesters, but in many instances that I've seen, caused by the police instigating fights with peaceful protesters. I ask you to remember your training and the Universal Code of Military Justice. Your sole purpose as members of our military is to protect the Constitution at all costs. The Constitution awards us the right to peacefully assemble, to protest, and to speak our minds freely. And just because the current people in power do not agree, that does not mean that they get to fire rubber bullets at us, to fire tear gas at us. That is unconstitutional. And any military member that follows orders to attack peaceful protesters is committing a war crime and is violating the tenets of the Constitution of the United States that you swore an oath to protect. I'm sure that there's a lot more that I could say, and I don't know if anyone will see this or will hear what I have to say. But I am deciding for myself to take a few days away from social media as much as I can. I am still fortunate enough to have a job right now, but that job does require me to function on social media for at least a few hours every day. But as much as I can, I'm going to be taking a break from everything. And before anyone calls me out for that, rewind the video and see what I said about knowing that I am privileged enough to be able to get off of social media and not have to worry about these issues. I am fully aware of that. I'm also fully aware that there are probably people who are going to call me out for taking this break. But I need time to recuperate from the past 3 months, regroup with myself, and I won't just be taking a break. Will be educating myself, and I will be learning ways to be the best ally that I can possibly be. Watching documentaries and reading books and trying to talk to people and trying to understand my place in all of this and where I can be the most effective at lobbying for change. If you feel so inclined, please feel free to share this with people. Maybe I said something that you have been thinking but haven't known how to say. But in case anyone watching this did not understand the overall tenet of this video, I am here to say that Black Lives Matter. I'm here to say that the United States is condoning war crimes against its citizens by attacking peaceful protesters and inciting riots. And that it is time for change, that it is time for something to finally break, and it is time for something to finally change, because we are exhausted, because we are so tired of having these conversations. But as tired as we are, we will continue to fight for this, and it will not stop until there is change.